And this was one of the first churches we visited when we were here. I remember Wanda. Because Wanda was one of the people that came up to me and Stacy and greeted herself. And that's been about 26 years ago. And of course, we also winded up going to 10th Street, which was closer to us. And the people that we met the first day that we were there was Bill and Ernestine, because Ernestine was in the foyer as you were going out. And she shook my hand and she says, she had a bunch of questions for us, and she says, well, you guys come on back. And the reason why I lay that story out there to you like that is because there are some things that I've learned over my course of time. We as Christians, as we move through life, we learn things. And the things that we learn, hopefully, are the things that will cause us to be better at what we do and who we are. One of the things that I've learned since I've been a Christian, and I want to take you to Matthew, if you will. It's Matthew chapter 10. And I want you to understand what I'm about ready to say, because one of the centerpieces of a Christian life is what I'm about ready to tell you right now. Drop down to verse 32 in Matthew chapter 10. Whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. That one statement right there should let us know something very important about our relationship with Jesus Christ and his Father. And you have to ask, well, what is he talking about? That means I want to be identified a certain way. We can put certain things of value to our lives, and we do. We value our friendships, we value our money, we value our position in life. And we learned, not this Sunday, but the Sunday before, about Solomon and all of the wealth and wisdom he had, and he used the word vanity. He said that I could have all of this, but I still don't know much about what's happening to me. You ever felt yourself that in some ways when you've done all you could and you've acquired things and you've done stuff, and you're still thirsty for something. Mm-hmm. You're still wanting to understand more about what it is you are. But I also want to hold that point right there, and I want to take you over to Romans chapter 10. Because the centerpiece of this is your confession. Because sometimes people don't like to admit to themselves when you're in public, you don't want to, and the people that you're around, because you like to have people around you, you want to display this wholesomeness, or whatever it is that you want to fit into a group of people. But the funny thing is, we have difficulties identifying the fact that we're Christians. Remember what we just read in Matthew? Go to Romans 10. And I want you to drop down to verse I want you to if you drop down to verse, in chapter 10, go down to verses 9 and 10. That if thou shalt confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus, and shall believe in thy heart that God has risen him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. And with the heart of man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. Folks in this room understand what I just told them. And you probably learned that along the way. As you decided to make a step towards Christianity and become a member of the Church of Christ, you know that you had to confess his name. But here's where the problem lies. The problem lies is when we confess his name, you fully understand what it is that you're doing at the time. But by the fact that you confessed his name, you're saying something about yourself and your relationship to God, because there is an element of obedience. Simply because, why? Because you said, I confess Jesus Christ, and he rose from the dead. We do that. We understand that. But the part of the equation that we sometimes overlook or we miss is the fact that we want Jesus to confess us in the presence of his Father. And in order to do that, we have to look at the people that we put around us and say something to ourselves about how we interact with others. Because that confession comes with a belief. It said right there in Romans that if you believe and you confess. But here's another part of that, what I'm thinking about, because there's a couple things that I've learned over the course of time. Not only if I confess Jesus Christ, I also must confess him in the audience that I'm in, or the people that I'm around. But I'm also supposed to look at life in contentment. You do know that. You know, one of the things that drives us harder or worse than anything that you can ever imagine is being uncontent. You want more. You're not satisfied. You're not satisfied with your status in life. You're not satisfied with the friends that you have. You're not satisfied on the job. I mean, there's a lot of things that rifle around our brains, but a simple thing as contentment. Let me show you something. Let's go to Hebrew, if you will. Chapter 13 in Hebrew. Let's drop down to verse 5. It says, let your conversation be without covetousness. You guys know what that is, don't you? Covetousness? You know when you find yourself in a situation where, man, that guy's got a nice car. Man, he's got a nice so-and-so. He's got something nice, and you look at it and you say in your mind, why can't that be me? Why can't I acquire those kind of things? You know? And of course, as we look closer, and be content with such things as ye have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I think if you were to start tying this together, some of the things that we know as a Christian. First, we know we want to identify ourselves as Christians. Second, the key to happiness is contentment. And here's one I want to take you to, as I've learned over my course in time. Let's go to 1 Corinthians, if you will. Let's go over to chapter 5 in 1 Corinthians. It's rather interesting too, because what I'm about ready to show you is something that we all know, we understand, but I'm gonna put a little twist to it. But I want you to read this. Bill, if you take, starting in Corinthians chapter 5, drop down to verse 7, and go down to verse 13, if you would.
Purge out therefore the old heavens, the leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I wrote unto you in the epistle not to company with fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out into the world. But now I've written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or a covetous, or an adulterer, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner.
Hold that thought, because I want to back you up here just a little bit. But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man who is called a brother. Notice that. I will tell you that over my span of 26 years that I have been in this area, in the North Chicago area, when my wife and I met, we met down in Charleston, South Carolina, and we went to Waukegan Church of Christ. And I came here, and I have met a lot of people in the church. A lot of different works, different perspectives, different beliefs. And I don't necessarily mean the different beliefs that believing something other than what we've discussed already. But there are folks that's among us, when I say us, I mean in the Church of Christ, that don't recognize the fact that there are things that are in the church that are not right. And they're the problem. It could be me, it could be you, it could be anybody. But the fact is, and I'm not saying that we are all that way. I'm not saying that. But I am saying, Bill, if you go ahead and finish that out, 12 and 13.
But what have I to do? To judge them also that are without. Do not ye judge them that are within? But them that are without God judgeth. Therefore put away from among yourselves that wicked person.
So I would imagine that you're probably rifling in your brain and saying, well, what is the point he's trying to make? What is he driving at? Well, I'm driving at this. When I was a young man, I remember I was in the 5th grade, and I had a buddy by the name of his name was actually Jerry Potter. He was a young man. We had decided to, I was in the 5th grade, and at that time, they integrated the schools. And Dempsey Brewster was one of the schools that they integrated, and that's the one my mom decided to send me to. And I always thought that that I was different. I lived different than Jerry Potter did, because Jerry Potter was a little white guy that was in my class, and I always thought his world was different than mine. And here again, sometimes we in the church, we think we don't know each other very well, and this is one of the things that Eric made mention that we should do sometimes. We don't know what the other person's world is like, and we think differently because they're not a part of our world, so you look at them differently. And this is the story that I'm trying to get to. I didn't want Jerry Potter to come to my house because I thought he lived different than I did. You follow me? And as time, and whenever we went out, we always found some place to meet, and we would ride bicycles together around the neighborhood. But then there was one time when Jerry Potter came to my house, and I was just petrified. You know, because I didn't know what he was going to think. But you know that in actuality, I found out something very interesting. Jerry Potter didn't have a father that was in his household. Jerry Potter was raised by a single mom. And I didn't think much about that, but until I went to his house eventually. Jerry Potter lived worse than I did. And I always had this impression that Jerry Potter was, because that's what I was exposed to. And what I'm trying to tell you is that we expose ourselves in the world to certain things. One of the things we know as Christians, we must identify as a child of God. Why? Is because when time comes, when Jesus said to us, I will confess you in the front of my Father, that is important. Why is that so important? Because that is who we are supposed to be. Jerry Potter was in a different world, I thought. But come to find out, he was worse off than I was. His mom struggled worse than my mom did. I had a mom and a dad, which made a difference in my life, I think. But you see, it's not always what you see. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. We have to be a light to the Christians as well as outside of the church. Because we know we're going to have folks in our midst that are not going to pass that litmus test. We have to set an example. Because when it comes down to someone confessing whether or not I was a child of God, I will forget all of the vanity that I've ever acquired to exchange that for that one moment. And we do have an issue with vanity. Whether or not you admit it or not, we all do. And I think back to that sermon we had a week ago about what Solomon said about all of his wealth and all of his knowledge. It didn't mean anything to him. Didn't mean one iota. But you know what means something to us as Christians? Matthew, what I just read to you. There is another part of this equation too that I've learned. Not only do I learn to identify and to understand what contentment means, but I also know who to put around me. That's what I was just reading you in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. You know, one of the the things, the greatest faults that Solomon in all his wisdom had in his later life, as well as David. It was the people he put around him. Think about it for a second. The wives that he had, the concubines that he had a greater influence over him than God did. You know, I probably shared this story with you. I probably said one time before, and it's a saying that we can all identify with you. I can tell what your life is going to be like by the company that you keep. You know, sometimes, I don't know, when I first heard that, I said, what do you mean, the company that you keep? You know, we like to think that we are this standalone person. We don't let people influence us, and, you know, we're straight and rigid and all this good stuff. People will influence us.
Yeah.
They will, and the next thing you know, you're doing something out of character. And wonder why. And this is a tough one. And I can read the scripture and I know when they were getting ready to put Jesus on that cross, he said, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Now, keep in mind, we also know that Jesus had the power to change you simply by touching you. He also had the power of his Father's legions of angels. We know through reading the scripture that if he wanted to stop this at any point, he could have. But he also knew he was doing his Father's bidding. But the point I'm making is we, as Christians in the Church of Christ, have problems forgiving people when they do things wrong. You hear what I'm saying? I want Jesus to confess me in front of my Father, but yet we have difficulties doing the things that he set us up for. He set an example for us to live a way of contentment, pick the right people, put them around you, and forgive those who trespass you. We have a tendency to not want to make that step. Now, we have a hard time trying to move forward, if you will, because our mind is saying one thing, and we know better. We should know better, especially if we believe the way we believe. So if you ask me, what have I learned over the 26 years that I've been a part of the Church of Christ community in North Chicago, Waukegan, and in Zion? Well, I know that I need to identify as a Christian, because those Christians, those folks that wear that title are going to be identified by Jesus Christ when the time comes. He's going to say, Dad, this is a good one. He's one of mine. He has been for some time. But I also know that living in a secular world, it is sometimes difficult for us to be content with our status and where we are. We struggle with that. We know what we call that, covetousness. We struggle with that. We also find ourselves in a very unique situation where we pick the crowd that we hang in. We do. We pick the people that we associate with. We pick the people that make us feel a certain way. If you make me feel comfortable, you're my friend. And I accept the fact that how you make me feel. Bill and Ernestine, I've known these folks for years. And there's nothing more gives me more joy than to see him in the mornings on Sunday when I come, because I know I'm going to have a good time. I really am. There's some people that you put around you that make your world differently. And believe it or not, Bill and Ernestine have made a difference in my world. I enjoy those folks, believe it or not. We have a good time. We really do. You know, and I joke with Bill, Bill jokes back, I joke with Ernestine, and we have a great time. Why can't that be extended? Why can't it just be not just Ernestine and Bill? Remember the one I told you about, Jerry Potter? When we think certain things about certain people, until we actually walk into their world and you see that they're no different than you are? Interesting, isn't it? We all want to get to heaven, don't we? That's the common ground. I know I do. But I know I got to do a lot of work to get there. I hope that I just didn't ramble on some stuff here and tie it together and someone says, well, he's done now. He can sit down and we can go on about our merry way. You know. Because the thing is, sometimes, believe it or not, I think the same thing. So I know what you see. You see, that's that idea that your world is probably no different than my world. Yeah, I have an opinion just like you do. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. And maybe I've expressed something that may enlighten you. I don't know. Thank you for listening.
Won't you stand as we sing the invitation of Psalm 169? Have thine own way.